You don't know what's going to happen most of the time until you actually make it happen.
There are things in this life that are just simple.
I want the bone. I'm going to go get the bone.
The bills can't be that high. They just can't be that high.
I know some folks who, sleep on a trampoline.
With kicks like yours, who needs a beat?
Hey, hi, hello. Welcome back to the Dean and Drew Show.
You found yourselves back.
You swore last week, never again. You said, I'm never clicking on that show. This is the last time.
It was too helpful, and those guys are too handsome. I'm never doing it again. And then you just couldn't help yourself.
Here you are.
Here's your hands back in the cookie jar.
Yep. And it will be next week and the following week, and there's just nothing you can do to break that cycle, unfortunately.
We won't judge you for it.
Maybe you'll learn something in the meantime.
Yeah.
I actually have something kind of interesting today. I learned something new today.
Well, it's Learning Monday, according to Brian at work.
It is Learning Monday, and
it's Learning Monday.
Today, I stumbled upon Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you might be sitting there saying, who's Maslow and how does he know what I
you're
need?
scratching your head going, well, why the flip do I need to know this?
Well, let me tell you, because you might learn something.
Yeah. Abe was on to something.
Created by Abraham Maslow, an extremely influential 20th century psychologist, and first introduced in his 1943 paper, A Theory of Human Motivation, he discussed his hierarchy of needs theory, which was named after him. Well, what do you know? The theory suggests that in order to focus/work on the next level in the hierarchy, humans must first achieve the prior. So there's 5 levels, which I'll get into in a second. And
you can't just skip to level 5. You got to get level 1, 2, 3, and 4 done.
Yeah. So in order, if you're focusing on your needs at level 1, you're not focusing on level 2. And it's only when you achieve those needs at level 1 that you then start to kind of think more about level 2 and then level 2 to level 3 and so on.
Yeah.
So there's 5 levels to the hierarchy of needs. And number 1 is physiological needs. I always want to say like psychological, but that's just not what it is.
Physiological. Your essentials. Food, your water, your shelter.
Yeah.
Bare bones.
The bare bone minimums. I actually remember learning about the bare minimums back in like 2nd grade. They educated us on that.
They
like
told us we needed to
your
eat.
Essentials, your food, your water, your shelter, your sleep, all your basic needs. And then there's your stability needs, which is protection from harm and a feeling of security. So routine, school, police, all these things that kind of enforce routine and security.
Yeah.
In life, love and belonging needs. So feeling accepted through avenues such as community, love, friendship, partners, etc. That's level 3. Level 4 is esteem needs. So confidence, status, respect, recognition, etc. So, your self-esteem. And finally, self-actualization needs, achieving one's full potential, creativity, and realizing growth. So those are your 5 needs in life, at least according to Abraham Maslow. And with this in mind, have you identified this theory in past conversations? Have you ever been talking to someone and looking back on it, you realize that they had satisfied this, that's why they're focusing on that, or they're really stressed out about this one thing because everything else is taken care of?
Well, I think you can take a broad example. Like, I think a lot of people out there kind of yearn for a significant other, but don't really have like security and like they don't have a job, or you know what I mean? Like they're kind of lacking in that department. Maybe I'm skipping a level here, but
no, it's not a rigid hierarchy. Like, people land all over the place.
It's all over the place, but I think, different strokes for different folks. I think some folks, need a career and some stability there to feel confident in approaching people romantically, and maybe it's the opposite for some people. I know some folks who, sleep on a trampoline and are perfectly comfortable with talking to anybody they want or applying for any job. Like, I think it kind of depends, but you can definitely sniff it on people. Yeah. When they talk to you about, what they yearn for, whether it is a partner or a career, that they need to fulfill a prior in order to get to the ladder.
Yeah. Or you watch somebody get with, a good partner and now they're worried about career stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
I know for one, that happened to me, I don't know, a year and a half ago, where I was going out with somebody, and after I'd kind of settled into what was going on and things were going, then I was more worried about, the whole status aspect of, am I getting my career off the ground? Am I getting this done? Like, that kind of thing. So then once the breakup happened, then it kind of flip-flopped back to the level 3, and then I kind of rebalanced myself, and I got all these relationships back, like parents, brothers, friends, whoever. Once that hole was kind of filled, then I went back to the esteem, and I was like, okay, let me focus back on the career and that sort of thing. So I've never really thought of it like that, because sometimes you go down on the totem pole, like I just mentioned, and sometimes you need to go back and fulfill those needs again.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting. I guess it adds more perspective to people who are dealing with problems. Like if you're dealing with somebody who's going through something and you're like, get over it, or why are you going through that? They're just not on the same spot on the totem pole, I guess.
Yeah. You gotta do a little pulse check and see where you're at. Because I think everybody kind of, like, what are you most concerned about on a daily basis? And that's probably where you're at.
Yeah. And it might be able to help you provide some comfort going through that, I guess. Like, I'm just here. I've got all these other needs met. I feel secure, at least, physically. I'm fed, so I'm good there too. I'm just worried about finding love, man. Like, that's where I'm at. And that's fine.
Are there specific ways to achieve these levels faster, to your knowledge? Like, if I'm on the love and belonging totem, is there like a cheat code for me to speed run that totem pole, or is that just kind of you're at life's mercy?
I guess in this scenario, I would say maybe you are on level 4 and you're trying to use level 4 to fix level 3. So level 4 is your esteem. Maybe you need that confidence to go out and find somebody. Or maybe you're not looking to find anybody and you're just focused on self-actualization, the creativity aspect of things, or spirituality, or whatever it is. So I guess if I were you, I would just identify where you are on the pole, and
I was just curious,
and maybe see where you can improve otherwise. And it's sounds fancy, but it's really basic.
We can write Maslow a letter. Say, dude, I'm in the love stage right now. Where's my wife at right now?
Yeah, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, you're holding me up here.
The good news is that if you're there, you're likely, fed and hydrated, and you feel secure. So you're worried about finding somebody to love, and that's fine, man. Or you found somebody who you love, and now you're worried about providing for that person. So you skip over to the esteem. Or maybe you found someone, you're putting food on the table, life's good, and you're worried about, a creative venture or your spirituality.
You're always going to be at some level. You're never going to have them all complete. So,
but I just think if nothing else, it gives perspective into other people's windows and what they're going through, and maybe helps you understand their situation a little bit better.
Yeah. So next time you're talking to somebody, think of Maslow and see where they're at. And you know what? Also think about where you're at.
Yeah.
Do a little pulse check. See where our dear listeners are at right now.
Yeah.
Probably doing pretty good because you're listening to our podcast.
Yeah, so you've already learned something new.
Yeah, Learning Monday.
Yeah.
You're way ahead of the curve. So
you're learning something today, and you're going to be a better friend maybe in the future. So.
You know what? Why don't we keep learning? Let's go to our next section.
Let's go to the next section.
Commentary!
All right.
So Dean picked this week's commentary. I actually have not heard it yet.
Yeah, so this is... You guys and Drew are hearing this for the first time.
Yeah.
So I will say, I was going through a bit of a tobacco last week. I was in a bit of a spot, and after talking with Drew and then hearing this podcast clip, it was kind of like, it gave a lot of perspective towards what I was going through. And the basic premise of this, what led up to this clip that we're about to play, is they're talking about the self-help industry and how it's kind of messy because depending on why you're going into the industry, certain pieces of advice or content are going to be more tailored towards you or more tailored towards somebody who's in a worse spot than you. Like if you're somebody who's got their stuff figured out and I'm saying, hey, you got your stuff figured out, but you've been doing the same thing for 10 years. Why don't you go try something new? Get out, put yourself out there versus somebody who's in a rough spot who just needs a bit of a pick-me-up. Calling you a lazy, idiot isn't going to help very much. So
yeah, it's all super messy and objective.
But where that led into is they're talking about an emotional aspect of things versus an intellectual aspect of things. And it'll make more sense when the clip plays, but go for it, Brandon.
Learning is a smart person's favorite way to procrastinate.
100%. Yeah,
that's what I've found.
That hits home.
And it's funny because I honestly think most of these problems are actually they're intellectually simple. They're just emotionally very difficult.
Right.
And so I think the tendency is that when something feels emotionally difficult, we assume that it must be intellectually complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And so we set ourselves to like, okay, I need to like buy a couple books about this. And, maybe I should watch this lecture on YouTube to like really understand this and take notes and like journal for a few weeks. And before I can like know exactly how to break up with my girlfriend or whatever. Right. And it's like, no, you just break up with your girlfriend. Right. Like it's not going to make it any easier.
But that's the avoidance you're talking about
yes,
here, which
totally.
is the emotional avoidance. And you do that through intellectualizing all this content or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. I will say for my over intellectualizing brain, what helped was just realizing that experience and action is the best teacher.
There you go. So
yeah, I agree.
I suffer a lot from an over intellectualizing brain. And that's why I picked this clip, is because that minute right there directly called me out last week. And I was sitting there and I'm like, man, there are things in this life that are just simple. Like even just events. Like this event happened. This is what happened during. And here I am now. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
But then I like to throw myself down rabbit holes and think, well, what if this happens? What if they perceive it this way? Or what, like, yada, yada, yada. And it doesn't help anything. But then after I heard that, and I also had a good conversation with Drew, just kind of telling him what was going on, it made me sit back and just think like, okay, it's just an event that happened.
Yeah.
And that's it. It doesn't need to be over complicated just because it's emotionally messy. Just because something's emotionally messy doesn't mean that it's complicated. The answer can be very clear. And I gave Drew the example last week of, when you're going through a relationship and maybe you're getting cheated on. That's very emotionally complicated because you're dealing with betrayal, you're dealing with all these other, emotions. But intellectually speaking and logically speaking, you should just leave that person. And that's all it has to be.
Yeah. They call it paralysis by over-analysis.
Paralysis analysis. They actually mentioned before that clip. They actually talked about that.
Yeah, I've heard that before, which is true. This actually an example that happened to me actually the last couple of weeks. Just brief overview. I've got a deal coming up in real estate, potential deal, special house, kind of really niche sort of thing. And there's an agent that I usually work with for a lot of deals, but doesn't really specialize in those sorts of things. So I called another agent. And for weeks, I'm like, man, like I don't want this guy to think I'm betraying him. I don't want him to, walk off on me or ruin my relationship with him. And I was really thinking about this for weeks. Like, how am I going to call him and tell him this? And, it's not that big of a deal, but to him it might be. And eventually I talked to my broker, John, and he's like, just call him, dude. Just call him and talk to him. It's that easy. I'm like, you're right. Yeah. That's the answer. So today I just called him up. I'm like, yo, this is what's going on. Just want to make you aware. He's like, oh, you're good. I appreciated the opportunity, but it is what it is. Yeah. And that was it. Like,
that's all it has to be.
All those scenarios. And that's the thing too. Like you make up all these scenarios in your head about this happening or this happening. Then you start thinking about how am I going to react to this? And you're just using all your brain power, but you don't know what's going to happen most of the time until you actually make it happen.
Yeah.
So that's what I learned today. And there you
go. Yeah, just because something's emotionally exhausting doesn't mean that it has to be complicated.
No, and
a lot of times you just have to make a decision. Like, it's like spending a bunch of money. Spending a bunch of money can be very emotionally taxing, but if it's the right decision, you just got to make the decision.
Yep.
And I'm talking, when I say spend a bunch of money, I mean like on education or a car or something.
Oh, yeah. I've kind of found myself in that loop right now too, where I'm kind of thinking about maybe going back to school or pursuing a different career. And then it's like, okay, well, what about all this? And you built this, but this might not happen anymore. And what if you don't make this much money? And it's, I was just telling Dean the other day, like, we tend to solve problems that don't exist.
I love solving problems that will never exist.
And everybody does. I mean, it happens most often when you're trying to fall asleep at night. But you think about all these problems that will happen, and then, okay, well, how are you going to... It just uses all your brain power, where instead you almost need to think like a dog or a cat, where it's just like, I want the bone, I'm going to go get the bone. And that's it. Whatever happens along the way or when you get the bone is what happens. But the dog doesn't sit there all day like, okay, well, what if Drew doesn't want to give me a bone? What if he feels bad? What if he feels like he has to get, like, they don't think about all that. They just go and get the bone. So
That's all it has to be.
and that's, I think, what Mark Manson is saying. Like, it doesn't have to be that complicated.
No.
But we're humans and we have brains and we make things complicated.
We love complicating things.
We
It's-
love complicating
and
things.
it's very frustrating.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I think what's interesting too is that whenever you go to your friend, you know, relationships are just such an easy example for all this, just because everybody's been through it. You go to your friend, or in this case, I go to my twin brother, Drew, and I say, hey, Drew, this is going on, and it has to do with a relationship problem. I give him everything. I push it all to the center, and I say, here you go, eat the sandwich that I've been eating. And he says, I don't know what you're complaining about, man. Like, this happened. You did this. It was the right decision. That's all it is. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. You didn't consider the fact that this could happen. And if I say this and I don't use this many syllables in the sentence, then blah, blah, blah. And he's like, yeah, I don't care. This is what it is. And if you've ever gone to a friend and told them something like that and they give you just kind of what seems like too simple of an answer, that's because they're not in the emotional
They're
wave
sober.
of it. They're just,
It's a sober
they're
mind.
looking at it logically and just saying, yeah, dude, like, you're good. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. And, you know, it's easier said than done. But
Sure, but that's why, I don't know. That's the explanation, I guess.
yeah, so don't overthink things. Maybe this week, pretend you're a dog who wants a bone.
Yeah.
And, you know, that thing you've been thinking about doing or that conversation you've been putting off because it's too hard.
Yep.
We all have those kinds of things. Think about one thing that you've been putting off or you're scared to do, or maybe you've had something on your mind that you've been meaning to confront. Pretend you're a dog, bro. Just go get it done.
You're a dog, and that raise at work is a bone, and you're not going to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe you are going through a relationship problem. I mean, we all know, like, when you're in that situation, what you want to do, or you have an idea, like, just go do it.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, happens, man. Like, life's a messy journey. Just embrace the mess.
Don't complicate it.
Embrace the mess, bro.
And if you catch yourself rabbit holing, like I do all the time, call it out. Just be like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah. You can usually
That's-
identify when you're going through it, something like that.
This
You're
is what I
rabbit
said.
holing.
This is the decision I made. That I made it out of logical concern.
Yeah.
That's all it has to be. And move on. And
There you go.
It's done wonders for me.
Think like a dog this week.
Yep. All right. Well, hopefully that bone's not on a table.
Yeah. Because we'd be taking it off. I'm convinced that our listeners love our crappy segues into different sections.
We're getting better at those.
Off the table this week. I suspect our listeners are among the chosen elite few who don't do this despicable, deplorable act. But we're taking off the table this week people who create, make, and play TikToks in public.
We will call it TikTok in public.
TikToking in public, any variation of it.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're showing a friend something, that's one thing. But I mean, I remember when TikTok, I feel like TikTok's still super popular. It is super popular. But back like when everybody was making TikToks, dude, like I remember people would set it up
Deplorable.
I mean, people still do it, but they'll set it up in stores. I remember walking out of Target once and there were like some girls had it set up on their car and they were in the middle of a parking lot, like in a street, throwing it down. I'm like, guys,
For what?
For what? You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you gotta prop your phone on a friggin' can of sour cream at Target and just start
Yeah.
hitting a dance, like
Go get a hobby.
yeah, get an actual hobby. I'm sorry,
Go make a friend.
the
and
bills
talk
can't be
to them.
that high. They just can't be that high. You just
No.
gotta hit a stupid dance in a
And
store.
Listening, like people who scroll TikToks in public at full
Yeah.
volume. I mean, it's
It's
so
annoying.
You're just annoying everybody else around you.
Because they don't ever watch the TikTok either. They'll scroll, let 2 minutes of it blare, and then they scroll to the next one. Do the same thing.
Yeah, you just get like fractions of a sentence every couple seconds.
It's so annoying.
It's so annoying. So
Like, at least pop an AirPod or have some respect to just go somewhere private and dance, man. No one wants to watch that.
hey, you have a house probably.
Hopefully.
Go to a park. Go in the woods where no one's there and just throw it down. I mean,
I get some
anywhere
more
but
views anyways.
the grocery store or where people just are. Don't do that.
Yeah, enough. So, we're taking that off the table. That
Yeah,
should be
I
a pretty. I feel like we've given the the listeners a couple easy, some softballs over the past couple.
Yeah,
weeks.
this one's convicting. I don't know if a lot of our listeners are doing this, and if you are, I mean,
Shame on you.
we're coming after you.
Shame
This
on
is
you.
this is a threat.
We
but
got to
yeah.
come up with a controversial one for next week.
Yeah, we're gonna come up with something pretty controversial next week. But yeah, that's the show today.
Thank you for listening. I hope you
Yeah.
learned something new today.
And Dee and I talked about it. We're actually gonna end our podcasts with the theme of our year. So every week we're gonna ask you the convicting question of what would you do if you weren't afraid, and do something this week that you've been afraid to do.
And if you've been afraid to leave 5 stars or review because God forbid Brandon lives a comfortable life,
Yeah.
then it's time to break that fear and do it. So
For-
go give us a follow, leave a 5-star review, give us a nice message.
Every 5-star review we get, Brandon gets a piece of bread.
Yep.
And he hasn't eaten in like 2 weeks.
No,
So
he's
please
very
help
hungry.
him.
So please help him out.
He's looking very frail.
We told Brandon if we get to 6 5-star, not even reviews, just 6 5-star ratings, then we will read him his love letters from home that his parents wrote him because they haven't seen him because he's been locked in the dungeon.
And
So-
if we get 10, Brandon gets to see the sun for the first time in a year.
Yeah, he's very
super
excited.
He's been drawing pictures of the sun.
Yeah.
So he's really excited about
he's been
it.
drawing pictures of the sun and bowing down to it. So it's getting a little desperate in the dungeon.
He's getting a little weird in the dungeon. So
So help him out.
yeah.
Do it for Brandon. Leave us a 5-star review.
Yes.
And what would you do if you weren't afraid?
What would you do if you weren't afraid?
See you next week.